Welcome back to the Assertive Podcast and happy holidays, everyone. I'm Erica.
I'm Jess.
And we are licensed professional counselors in Texas. Normally, this podcast is where we review Am I the Asshole Reddit threads to help you learn skills for communication, healthy boundary setting, and assertive interpersonal functioning. Today, we are deviating from our usual framework, and instead of reviewing an Am I the Asshole post, we are going to finally break down the 6 core emotions, what those emotions are, what it looks like when we have those emotions excessively or insufficiently, as well as what data those 6 core emotions give us. I'm very excited for this episode. We've referenced it a lot throughout season 1, so I'm glad we're finally doing this. It's a lovely little holiday gift for everybody.
I know. You're welcome, everybody. Love this. Best.
All right. So we each have a spiel that we usually give our clients. Again, this is something we both share with our clients. I do it usually in the first 2 to 3 sessions. For sure, by their 3rd session, we've probably knocked this out. So I'm going to let Jess share her spiel, and then I'll add in any pieces that maybe she doesn't give her clients that maybe I do.
Yeah.
But we learned it from the same person. Shout out Candy. Happy holidays, Candy.
Turn up.
So chances are a lot of this is the same for both of us, but we'll see. We each have our own kind of personal interpretations.
Yeah. So the 6 core emotions, they're a way of simplifying like a feelings wheel. So this concept tells us that emotions are neither good nor bad. They're simply signals of indications, right? So what our job is as people is to identify what these different emotions are telling us and then to respond to them in a way that keeps them within their appropriate range. So what healthy coping looks like is knowing what an emotion is telling you, resolving it, and then making sure it doesn't get out of proportion. So that's kind of my general gist. I like the I think Candy said it one time where she was like, emotions are like smoke detectors. So just smashing out the smoke detector doesn't make the fire go out. It just means like you're not hearing like warning bells. And so basically the emotions are just smoke detectors of different occurrences going on. So by not coping, we're just like turning off the alarm, where healthy coping is actually resolving the thing that the alarm is indicating, you know? Yeah. So what do you tell your clients about it?
I start off the same. I tell them emotions are just giving us data that helps us interpret and navigate this crazy world we live in. I let them know that often we will hear people refer to emotions as positive or negative, but in session, they will not hear me refer to them that way. If I am, I'm probably using air quotes. And instead, I will refer to them as being comfortable or uncomfortable, which refers to our willingness to actually tolerate that emotion.
Okay. The similar things of like the job of being a person isn't to have no emotions, but it's to have them and to like honor them and use them appropriately, huh?
Yeah. Okay. Emotions are what allows us to have the full experience of being a human. If we're only allowing ourselves to experience joy, we're missing out on so much.
I see that too. I said this is the essence of life, right? Of like existence is having access to the full spectrum of these things here.
Life is messy, and usually emotions are messy as well.
I agree. So I guess, to rip the Band-Aid off, the 6 core emotions as you and I conceptualize them. So there's different frameworks. This isn't the holy grail of emotions. This is just a framework for it. Just the overview of it. So we got 3 that are energizing, 3 that are energy depleting. So the 3 energizing emotions are joy, anger, and fear. And the 3 energy depleting emotions are pain, guilt, and shame. Is kind of the structure there.
When we say energy providing and energy depleting, how do you explain that to your clients?
I say it comes down to like arousal state. So I'm referring to like a physiological response in the body. So basically, one makes you breathe heavy, makes your pupils constrict, makes your heart race, and you get kind of sweaty, all those things. And then the other items are more isolating. You can actually feel yourself wanting to be smaller. You might kind of shut down, take up a space in the room. That's kind of how I articulate that. But
Yeah. And I
similar.
think a lot of times that manifests into the physical response.
Yeah. Okay. So different like calls to action kind of on these emotions too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're going to give you guys a really brief overview of these emotions. And then season 2, we're actually going to start off by going in depth with each of these emotions. We're going to go more in depth into the data. It tells us the behavioral motivations, specific coping skills, where we feel it in our body, and anything else fun we think of along the way.
Yeah, so you guys can kind of prime yourself for what you're about to focus on. So with each of these emotions, we're going to tell you guys the function of it. So like what it's telling you. And then we'll talk about what it looks like when there's, too much and then not enough. So we're going to go through kind of each of these items, each of these emotions, covering those kind of main high level points there. So the first one we said is joy. So that one seems intuitive. People are like, well, I know what is happy. What is being happy? So this would look like joy, elation, excitement, enthusiasm would be kind of synonyms for this emotion word. But basically the point of joy is it tells us that life is worth living. It tells us what energizes us, what's important to us, what we like, what we're good at, all those things. And so too much joy, we see that's present in bipolar, which is a quality of mania, of things are really great. We feel incredible. We feel invincible. We're kind of out of control with energy. And then not enough joy is what depression looks like. Just lack of things going well, things worth living. Would be the first one on joy.
With my clients, I will also let them know that even having too much or too little of an emotion does not mean we're experiencing that emotion inappropriately. So if I won the lottery, I would probably become a bit manic. Right? I would feel euphoria. I would feel pretty invincible. But life tends to naturally balance us out. So I would be manic up until I got my tax bill. So I would probably balance back out, or at least move a little bit closer to that baseline of joy, and hopefully do something value congruent with my money.
That's right. So you're saying sometimes you can't be at one of the ends of the spectrum, but duration is also important too. Of like, I'm thinking of, just kind of like future episodes on joy. We'll get into things like what's called values congruent activities, so like identifying your values. I think like the hedonic effect is something interesting for us to talk about, that plateau like you talked about. So like we'll have more kind of on joy and like how to know what's working for you and like what to expect even with joy.
And the flip side with depression, things happen in life and it's appropriate for us to be sad about. If I lost my job, probably should be sad.
Right, that'd be situationally relevant, right?
Yes. So our emotions are always in relation to the situation and the duration. And that's what, as therapists, we say, like, is this alarming? Am I concerned for my client?
And that's what that makes something clinical, right? Is like, is it circumstantial? So are you having a lack of joy for I say no reason, right? But like, are there situations that are not present that's causing this level, so I think that's what, when there's depression without cause, that's what clinical depression looks like. There's a lack of joy that's obviously some organic or chemical source. So joy, so too much is mania, not enough is depression. Energizing tells us that what makes life worth living for us. The next one we have is anger.
Love anger.
we talked about this a lot in the podcast, right?
Yes.
The point of anger is to give you a voice, is what we say.
This should not be news unless this is the first episode you're listening to.
Yes. So anger gives you a voice. This is where we get into communication styles, boundary setting, just overall, I think, emotional expression in general. But so when I talk to clients about anger and other terms on that spectrum would be like irritability, annoyance, rage, being pissed off, whatever. Those are all on the anger spectrum. So the point of that is you need to talk to somebody about something. So sometimes, when we're too angry and our voice is too big, we become aggressive, which is the high end of anger. Not enough anger is also problematic because that's when we become passive, so either our voice is too big or our voice is too small. And what appropriate application of anger looks like is assertive. So where you're experiencing anger, you're recognizing that you're angry, and you're saying, who should I talk to about this anger with? That's a weird sentence. Just like really good communication and stuff like that. Yeah. And so whenever a client's expressing that they're angry, I'm always looking for opportunities for discussion with their support system of like something that they're needing or something like that. Yeah. What do you say about anger?
I say almost the same thing.
Yeah.
I also throw in like the boundaries piece. So when they're saying like, I'm really angry or this really pissed me off or God, I just wanted to strangle them. I'm like, pretty big reaction. What boundary do you think they violated?
Like they know. They know.
Yeah. Times where it's appropriate to be passive, I tell people we tend to be more passive naturally, I think, when it comes to things we are reliant on. So if you think about like our jobs, we will probably let more shit slide at work because we need to keep our jobs and pay our bills and keep food on the table.
That's fair. There might be certain domains in which your boundaries look different.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair.
Aggression, there is appropriate times. Physical aggression, I say I never, unless we're like being physically harmed. We should not be engaging in like physical aggression. But what I always say is like aggressive communication. If like a child's about to touch the hot stove, we are probably going to speak really loudly and be very short sentences like, stop, right? We want to grab their attention. Now, if we keep yelling at them, we have stayed in aggression too long. We need to come back and say, what are you doing in the kitchen? You know better than to touch the stove. You don't know if that's on or not. You could have gotten really hurt, right? Yeah. But if we just stay yelling, which a lot of times we do, we've stayed in that too much phase too long.
So there's a point where sometimes your voice does need to get big because it's important that you're heard, and like in power struggles, that is necessary sometimes with a child-parent dynamic. Okay. Yep. Then we got, so joy makes life worth living. Anger gives us a voice. We got fear is the third energizing emotion. So the function of fear is it keeps us safe.
Super basic.
Super basic, right? Like it motivates us to protect ourselves. So obviously, when we think about physical safety in terms of like anxiety, right? So I say if there's a tornado coming down, there's sirens going off, there's appropriate fear that will motivate you to seek shelter. In terms of, emotional safety, this could be, attaching to an unsafe person, being in a toxic relationship, something like that. So too much fear looks like paranoia, and not enough fear looks like recklessness. So basically protecting yourself too much or not protecting yourself enough. So we talk about like appropriate times for paranoia. This can look like hypervigilance sometimes, but there's certain circumstances in which you are actually unsafe, right? Maybe you're interacting with a deregulated or abusive person. You are in a physical risk of physical harm. About like reckless, I always use the like 18-year-old boy with a motorcycle kind of analogy. Of like there's certain, I think lifespan times where this is a natural disregard for self, right? But this looks like behavior of like not doing things that should keep you safe. So just throwing caution to the wind would be like a recklessness. Sometimes this can happen when we do feel safe. We don't need to engage that fear response. What do you talk to people about with fear in general?
I talk to people about fear with a few different things. One, I tell them because it is a basic instinct. Fear's in our amygdala, which is part of our reptilian brain, which is one of the first structures that develops in utero. It's responsible for our survival. That's why it's there first. It will often trump a lot of these other emotions, because we cannot have a lot of these other emotions if we are not safe.
Yeah, really primitive on this
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of times why it's hard, because there is some innate emotion that pops out that sometimes we're like, I don't want to be afraid here. It's like, well, you're, at the edge of a cliff. Your
Appropriate.
brain is like saying we should have like a relative level of fear here to stay alive.
Yeah. Like I was like synonyms, right? So synonyms
Yeah.
for fear would be like terror, worry, anxiety, stress. Those are all like on the spectrum of fear. And when we get into more in-depth episodes on fear, there is productive stress.
Yes.
And so it's all with keeping it like within the framework. But that's why I think when we're feeling really stressed, I think that's where that physical calming is so important, because it is so primitive when it just hijacks our brain. So we have to get out of that really reptilian center in like our wiring, and like re-engage with our rational minds through calming the body, because it hijacks our stress response and our survival instincts.
Yep.
I love talking about fear and anxiety and stress. It's so interesting to me.
Yeah. We talk about like the physical unsafety, but I think for people who do have like anxiety conditions, it is an emotional unsafeness. So it's a fear of maybe feeling another emotion that at some point in time was too overwhelming for them to experience, right? So the fear of getting hurt, the fear of being too outspoken or setting a boundary, because in the past that maybe resulted in a spanking because you quote unquote talked back, right? So now we get anxious because of some previous emotional response, and we're worried about having that again. It's still the appropriate fear response that is happening, but it's not because of a physical threat, it's of an emotional threat.
So the fear might be your response to having experienced another one of the emotions on the spectrum, is that we don't like this one particular sensation, so we become anxious about having it.
Yep.
We got the 3 energizing emotions. We got joy, anger, and fear.
Yep.
So give us so then you take the lead on the 3 energy depleting emotions.
Energy depleting. Well, as you mentioned earlier, we tend to feel a loss of energy. Our arousal system tends to slow. We lose like physical energy to do things. We do get like a behavioral motivation to isolate or be alone, kind of conserve energy, turn inward. I always think of like curling into fetal position with some of these emotions.
Yeah.
So really just kind of go into like this self-protection because it just feels so icky. These for sure are uncomfortable. People will for sure feel joy. They will tolerate anger in either a passive or aggressive way. Some people will be really healthy and assertive with it. And fear, I think they will also be more willing to tolerate those because they are energizing.
Kind of empowering, huh?
Yeah.
All
right. So in our de-energizers, we have pain, guilt, and shame. Pain, I always say, kind of has 2 data points that it communicates with us. The first is just like physical pain, tells us where in our body we need to give some attention to. Emotional pain is doing the same thing. There's something going on with us that we need to give some attention to.
Yeah.
So something needs to be healed, basically. The other thing it does is it shows us where our attachments are.
Yeah.
And so with my clients, I use the example, like if the dog ran away and I'm not feeling anything, probably wasn't attached to that dog.
That's what's so hard. Like a death, and you feel that loss. It's like, yeah, that's a huge loss of relationship. That's a loss of connection with that person. That's deeply painful.
Yep.
In other words, for pain would be sad, hurt, loss, grief. That would be other ways that we describe pain.
Yeah.
Pain.
Absolutely. So when we don't have enough pain, we tend to be numb. This is both like emotional numbness as well as physical numbness. Too much pain, we tend to feel very hopeless and helpless, to where we get this sense of dread and it's never going to end. I will feel like this for the rest of my life.
Like despair.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks. It's like I was pre-vet before I went to counseling, and they talk about, but like you spay and neuter an animal, right? That's a common outpatient procedure, but they say you want to be careful, especially with female dogs, to not give them too many pain meds because they'll be unaware that they have an injury. And so you almost want them to have a little bit of pain because it lets them know that they need to slow down and like not jump on the couch and things
Mhm.
like that. And so part of what pain does is it helps you heal because it's like you need to sit the fuck down and like give this some time. Right.
Yep.
So I'm like emotional pain. It is even though it hurts, it is in itself a healing experience, because it's letting you know of like wounds that you've incurred that need your attention.
Yep.
And if we're numbing out and don't have appropriate pain, we're at risk of further injury because we're not getting feedback loops that something's wrong.
Mhm.
And it's uncomfortable to be in pain, obviously, but
Yeah.
like it gives you time to like sit in that, which the average American adult does really not enjoy that. That's not a fun place to be. In
Yeah.
my observation of clients, this is a really uncomfortable emotional experience to be in pain.
Mhm. And that's what I think people get worried about with all of the emotions, is that it will last forever and they'll get into this hopeless state. But the thing is, they typically come in waves. If we just sit in it, it will pass.
That's what I tell clients. I said, it's like a wave. It's going to rush over you. You think it's going to drown you, but it's not. The wave's going to break. You're going to be hysterical for 20 minutes and then you're going to get tired, So like to tell clients, I was like, you need to go cry this shit out. It's going to go away, And like the first time they're real unsure and they're skeptical and then they do it and they're like, that was kind of cathartic. And then, if I just let myself do it, it goes away. But like with pain, especially, like you have to go through it. Like people thought, if I was sick and just would have rested, I would have got better faster. Like it works that way emotionally too. If you just acknowledge that you're having it, lean into it, it's gonna heal itself.
Yep.
Pain's a
Mhm.
weird one like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thoughts on that one. What's the next one for us?
So guilt and shame, I always do the data points together with my clients because a lot of times they do kind of travel together, for lack of a better phrase.
Okay.
So when we think about guilt and shame, guilt is usually externalized versus shame that's internalized. So if you guys have listened to other podcasts or done any type of self-help reading or follow other social media, you may have heard or seen the phrase, guilt is I did bad. Shame is I am bad. So shame really tends to be more of how we view ourselves. So guilt is telling us that we are usually breaking other people's rules or value sets, whereas shame is telling us we are breaking our own rules or value sets. And a lot of times the various societies we live in often influence our own value sets, which is why they travel together. So if I personally believe that stealing is bad, and I'm a part of a religious group who says stealing is bad, and I live in a country that believes stealing is bad, and then I steal, I not only broke other people's rules, I broke my own, so I will feel guilt and shame. And this is why they often come together. So not enough guilt. Jess, you like to use the phrase offender. We tend to offend a lot. I use the more clinical term of like antisocial, meaning anti-against social society. So this has nothing to do with introverts versus extroverts. So somebody who is antisocial is out breaking a bunch of society's rules. Versus too much guilt, we tend to feel over-responsible. So we're taking responsibility for roles that really aren't ours to take on. And I think we talked about this in season 1 with mom guilt, that episode, where there's some inappropriate guilt happening that she's taking responsibility for the dad's lack of parenting in that situation. And then with shame, not enough shame. We have some narcissism going on. Too much shame, we tend to feel really worthless. And I explain this to my clients. It's kind of that internal cognitive breakdown. It's like, God damn, you can't even keep your own fucking rules.
You piece of human garbage. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a high shame. With guilt and shame, do you think that there's a place to be on the low and the high end of the spectrum? Or do you say these are more moderate?
I think Guilt, I think it is okay to be antisocial. And the thing with it is shame will usually trump guilt. So our own value set is usually going to trump societies or whatever groups we're involved in. This is why people break away from like family norms. They're okay with what they're doing.
So you're saying antisocial would be appropriate if the rules are kind of pathological. Like there are times in which you should go countercultural because the system that you're in is problematic, like getting out of a cult or something like that.
More or less. I won't say like it's okay depending on what we're doing. Like if your belief is to just go around and stab random people, but even that is biased by my own personal value set.
If there's a disconnect between what's important to you and what culture is telling you. So you might have low guilt, but moderate shame. Or like,
so you may be balanced in shame, meaning you're not feeling any shame. And you're probably not feeling enough guilt for what society is probably saying you need to feel. So maybe some pro-social, or again, my own bias value set, pro-social examples would be individuals who helped with the Underground Railroad or who hid Jews during the Holocaust, right? Technically, they were committing illegal acts. Right. Chances are they were not feeling any guilt, even though society said, like, you should be feeling guilty for this. And they also weren't feeling excess shame because it went towards their own personal value set. So they could still look in the mirror and say, I'm proud of who you are.
Okay. Making sense. I think it's so interesting as a therapist. I can tell, when somebody is talking about an energy depleting experience, you can watch them become depleted. You watch them kind of slump over, their tone of voice gets a little lower, a little slower. It's like you can watch people's like life force fade out of them when they're going through something painful or having a lot of shame. It's like, it's interesting to watch that express itself.
People with high empathy often tend to get kind of wrapped up in other people's emotional experiences. And that's where we kind of coined the term vicarious trauma, because it was kind of traumatic, but it didn't actually happen to you. You're living vicariously through them. So therapists see this a lot. First responders will see this a lot. Medical professions will see this a lot.
For sure. When we get into the episode specific for each one of these emotions, we'll talk about like, what is this emotion experienced in the body? Like, where do people describe this hitting them? And I think even from like an empathetic standpoint, when you and yourself know what it's like for you to experience these emotions, when you're listening to other people, you can pick up emotional cues based on your own like physical responses to things too. Of like, I know, when my heart pounds, I'm anxious. Listening to a story, you can reflect like that person's probably feeling stress because I felt stress listening to it,
Yeah.
Noticing those things.
Or for clients who struggle to feel emotions because that maybe was not acceptable in their family of origin to express emotion.
Yeah.
Like knowing, okay, my heart is racing, so I'm probably feeling one of the energizing emotions, joy, anger, fear. It can even help you just narrow it down a little bit.
Totally. How I like to use this with clients is we got the first bucket. Am I energized or am I energy depleted? Let me get those three options. Okay, what is the emotion telling me? And like if we learn specific skill sets with each of these emotions, I think that lets us not be so afraid of it because we know what it's doing for us, And so I think this really just helps, I think, simplify emotions in general and gives us some like action points. I just think that this helps us like live our lives without having to be so avoidant and tiptoe on stuff, because we know whatever we encounter, we can deal with it because those are all good things to feel. We don't have to hide from stuff.
We don't have to be afraid of it all. Yeah. I think the last thing I would want to share with listeners, because I share this with my clients, is I then conceptualize different mental health issues into the realm of emotions. And I think no matter what they're experiencing or coming to treatment, it just normalizes it, right? So we already talked about with joy, we have bipolar with the depression and the mania, but you also have your depression disorders, mood disorders. With anger, we don't necessarily see that so much, we do with like anger management problems, oppositional defiance disorder, which is usually diagnosed in kids.
Mm-hmm.
Fear, we have our anxiety disorders, PTSD, which we talked about. Pain with the numbing, this is where all of our addictive behaviors are coming in, right? Yep. So any substance use, whether it's drugs, alcohol, nicotine, then we have like gambling, sex addictions. All of those behaviors are used to numb out pain, and the thing we maybe didn't say with numbing. So we start with numbing the pain, and then that's going to radiate to the other 5 emotions. So soon we're numbing our fears, then we're numbing our anger, then we're numbing our guilt and our shame. And the last thing we numb, because we will 100% sit in some joy, last thing we'll numb is our joy, and then we are completely numb and we just cannot feel anything.
Yep.
Hopelessness and
choose, but emotions turn off, right? They all get shut off.
They'll all eventually get shut off. Mm-hmm. Hopelessness and helplessness, those are actually diagnostic criteria in depression disorders. Mm-hmm. Same with guilt. If some over responsibility is also a diagnostic criteria that we see pop up in depression disorder. Antisocial personality disorder is there in guilt. We already talked about narcissism. Feelings of worthlessness is also a diagnostic criterion of depression. So when we conceptualize what's happening with our mental health and we just break it down into the emotions, for a lot of my clients, they're like, wow, this makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
I don't feel so crazy or insane or broken, or there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of gives them a little bit of hope, a little bit of direction of like, okay, this is what I need to be doing.
And I love that. And I love, like, we talk, like, how communication skills are to resolve the emotion of anger, right? Like that is like, so it's not just communication skills for the shits and giggles of it, but it's like, if you don't know how to have a voice, and like, you're not going to be able to use your emotions functionally either.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's all these other skills of, it's not just about the emotion, but it's like, if you know what you're supposed to do with it, there's all these other like opportunities, you know, to like develop your tool belt around those things.
Yep. And I think it allows us to get to the bigger issue. So if we are not using our voice because in childhood we got hit when we spoke up, well, now we have to go deal with the trauma of that. So now we got to go deal with the pain. Right. And now once the pain's resolved, now we can start applying the skills, because we can teach you the skills, but if the fear is still there, that's going to trump it.
Yeah.
Fear is to keep us safe. So if there's fear of doing any of these emotions, we have to resolve the fear.
Yeah. I love that. So for you personally, just for the listeners, what emotion do you think you tend to skew high on, and what emotion do you think you tend to skew low on? And then I'll answer too.
I also make my clients do this at the end of the session, and I write that shit down.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Joy, I would say I'm usually pretty balanced. If I become unbalanced, I am leaning more towards depression.
Okay.
Anger, we all know this. I am conflict avoidant. I'm getting a lot better at it. Yeah. So fear, I tend to lean anxious.
Okay.
Pain, that's a good one. I think I'm pretty balanced. I don't know if I really veer one way or the other with pain, but 9 times out of 10, like when I'm sad, I will sit there and cry. Guilt, I'm definitely historically over responsible. Definitely gotten a lot better at keeping that balance, but I do tend to take on responsibility for shit that is not mine to own.
Good.
Shame, over on the too much.
So you tend to go high on 4 out of the 6.
Yes.
Okay. For me, for joy, I definitely am a depressive type, so I lean towards depression. Anger, definitely aggressive. Fear, it depends on the domain. I think I'm a naturally anxious person, but on this front of pain, when I'm numbing, I get quite reckless. So those go together for me. Yeah, pain, again, it does kind of feed into the depression, but I'm more inclined to get avoidant about that and to like numb out. Guilt, I actually think I'm pretty balanced on guilt. I think sometimes maybe I'll reflect back of like, oh my God, that was so embarrassing, that thing I did in middle school. But I think I don't tend to have like a ton of inappropriate guilt, I don't think. And then shame, probably more towards the higher end of like worthlessness, probably more so. But that was mine. So
Okay.
I'm depressive, aggressive, paranoid, numbing, balanced, and worthless.
Okay. So one thing with my clients, I tend to see them group
Uh-huh.
on too much or too little based on whether it's an energizing emotion or de-energizing.
Oh, I see. So they might be manic, aggressive, and paranoid, and then also numb, antisocial, and narcissistic. So they would
Mhm.
skew on the spectrum depending on how energizing the emotion is. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if like they're feeling depressed and passive, they're probably going to skew anxious, hopeless, over responsible, and worthless. Normally my folks
Oh,
who
I
like
see what you're saying.
skew my folks who
Mhm.
skew manic, they're not also feeling hopeless or over responsible or worthless. Part of mania is feeling kind of empowered and invincible. So they're usually skewing to numb, antisocial, or narcissistic. And I do have a client who's like, I know I'm probably heading into mania because I'm feeling kind of big-headed. I'm feeling like really confident about like my work tasks, and like my imposter syndrome's really low. And that's a flag for me that I may be getting ready to go into a manic state and I to be on alert.
I think because there's only so much energy in the system. So if one, so like you'd only have so many things go on. So that makes sense that like if one is out of whack, the others would almost appreciate to like balance it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm.
So there's also a balance in that. So if you're like, oh, these I'm like really low and these I'm really high, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So maybe if like say they're skewing low on fear because they're reckless, skewing high on shame because they're worthless, that creates like a high risk situation for unsafe behavior, right? Because if it keeps us safe, if you don't value yourself, you're not going to keep yourself safe. You're going to be reckless, right?
Yep.
So I can see that. I see what you're saying there. That's a good point.
So I also have kind of that convo with my clients at the end of it when we wrap up and look at where they tend to land on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and I love the 6 core emotions overall because I think, one of the I guess criticisms of cognitive behavioral therapy is this idea that like as soon as you have an emotion, you got to change it. If you don't like how you feel, just change how you think, and then you won't feel that way anymore. And that might be that's a little bit of an oversimplification of cognitive behavioral therapy. But I really like this modality because it lets you be emotional, right? It lets you have emotions and them not be viewed as pathological. It lets you just live in them and to find them to be useful and helpful. And so it's not about changing how you feel. It's about doing what the emotion is signaling to you. So like I really appreciate blending this in because sometimes maybe it's not reasonable to feel a certain way or you don't want to feel that way. So there's cognitive tools to resolve that. But I just really love this model of just having emotions have their space. Nothing that needs to get changed about them. They just are things,
Yeah. With the CBT framework, one thing I always would tell my clients when we were doing the traditional like CB map on the boards would be the emotion may not change. And if it doesn't, that's probably a cue that it's appropriate for the situation. So if we change the thought, and let's say like the initial thought was,
I'm going to go rob this bank and kill everybody. I don't know. What are we talking about?
Let's do that. I'm going to rob this bank. That was probably one thought. I usually had them identify like 2 or 3 thoughts. One would be like, I'm poor. I have bills to pay. So corresponding emotions, they may have some fear of like, can I get away with this or not? They may have some stress of how am I going to make ends meet? They may also be a little like impulsive or manic or empowerment, like, oh, I have a solution, right? If we change some of these thoughts, it doesn't necessarily change our life circumstances. Stressed may stay on the list because we still have bills to pay.
It's like legitimate threats to your safety that still exist, right? Right.
Yeah.
It's not the smoke detector doesn't make the fire go out, right? Same kind of thing. Yeah.
So sometimes our thoughts will change and our emotions will not. Yeah. And that is okay. But sometimes just thinking about them differently allows the behavior to change. So now I'm not going to rob a bank. I can have a thought of I'm going to rob a bank and not go rob a bank.
Yeah. Or sometimes I even tell clients who are obsessive, I say, okay, that's the function of anxiety, which is fear. Is there actual risks? No. Is there anything that needs your attention? No. Like, okay, you have an obsessive personality. You're probably going to be kind of obsessive for a couple days and then it's going to go away. But you probably are going to feel just idiopathically anxious. That's probably what's going to happen, And I think even just like recognizing like your patterns and being like, I can exist in this state. And if I've recognized, okay, anxiety keeps me safe. I'm safe. There's no actions to take, but I still feel anxious. Okay,
Mhm.
I have anxiety. Move on with, like I think it allows like self-acceptance too, of like just because I'm in this state doesn't mean I need to change this mood state. That's just what I'm experiencing for right now. It'll
Mhm.
go away,
Yeah.
Ugh, I love this so much. This is like so foundational. It's like my therapy modality. Like this is
Same.
like every session when a client's mad, I'm like, what do you think you have a voice about? Like what are the risks here? Or like you're feeling guilty. What rules have you broken? Like I reference this like a lot,
Mhm.
or hey, you're depressed. What's one values congruent activity you're gonna do between now and next session to bring some joy into your life?
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah. Those are the core emotions. There's obviously a lot more to delve into, which we will be addressing season 2.
In season 2, we're going to take 6 emotions. We're going to shoot to do about 2 episodes in emotion. We're going to break down further the function, the coping skills, how to use that appropriately, how to experience in the body. And then, for anger, we'll get into anger management. For joy, we'll get into the values and all those different kind of shoot offs too. So listeners look forward to that in the next first 12 episodes or so of season 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think on season 2, do you think we're going to go down like in order? We'll do joy first and end with shame.
That is a absolutely great question that we will have to TBD. I have no idea.
Either. I know.
I can't say. We would like to keep the basic framework of the podcast and continue to pull Am I the Asshole posts.
Yeah. That's true. So part of what we're pulling from will dictate our approach.
Yeah. But we would like to keep with the post only because it shows the emotions with real life examples. Like we can kind of throw out these nuanced examples that we share with clients or that we've gotten from sessions with our clients. But if we can give you like a whole background story that people are giving us in Reddit or that you guys are sharing with us yourselves, then we'd much rather use like real life examples to show you like how this shit plays out. So we're obviously going to delve way more into this in each episode that's going to be tailored to each individual emotion. So season 2 should be really, hopefully, educational. Our hope and our goal is by doing this, you guys feel really normalized in just the emotional experiences you have every single day. We want you to have a vocabulary for these emotions. We want you to have some base knowledge of these emotions. Even if this education is all you ever get, I think this can be really, really helpful and transformative in how you view those emotions. So hopefully when people ask you how you're feeling, we can grow beyond okay, which is not an emotion, fine, which is not an emotion, or my favorite one that I just heard, it's been really emotional lately.
I'm feeling some kind of way. I love that. What kind of way might that be?
So with this episode, if you guys check out our Instagram posts today, you will see a feelings wheel. Also, just Google a feelings wheel. That is also going to be really helpful in being able to create this emotional vocabulary.
Yeah.
But season 2 is going to be coming in the spring. Exact dates are to be determined. Follow us on Instagram at Assertive Podcast. When we have those dates, they will be released there first. So if you guys want to stay up to date on all of the news and what we're doing, you can check us out there.
Cool.
You can also email us. That's kind of old school for the younger generation, I learned. assertivepodcast@gmail.com is going to be the email for anybody who feels more comfortable with email, or if you guys are sending us your own personal situations. Those are obviously going to be a little bit longer. You may not want to send that in a DM. And again, we would love to hear your guys' situations, what emotions you're struggling with. If you have your own personal, like, am I the asshole experiences or difficulties with emotions, we would love to hear those so we can speak directly to what you guys are working with or struggling with. Alrighty. Other thoughts, questions, concerns, things for them to look out for?
No, not that I can think of.
Okay. If you guys haven't already checked it out, our Miss Jess here is also doing a couple of guest appearances on Intuitively Authentic. You can check them out on Apple Podcast or Spotify. She'll be doing a different version of emotions. She also already did an episode with them going in more depth with thought errors, which we covered in our season 1 as well. So if you guys are interested in just another replay or another perspective of this, you can go check them out as well. She'll be on those. We don't know release date of the emotions.
Couple weeks, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll probably be out 1 or 2 weeks from now. The other one is called Don't Believe Everything You Think, is the title of that episode. So you can check her out there.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Give you a little plug.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. The podcast is like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Love the holidays.
All right, guys, that's what we have for you until the spring. We hope you enjoy this and find it very helpful and useful in your day-to-day life and experiences. We hope you reach out, let us know what you thought of this episode, how this is going for you. And as always, we want to hear what's going on in your life and what you need help with. So hit us up at Assertive Podcast on Instagram or assertivepodcast@gmail.com for email. We hope you all enjoy your holiday season, your new year, since we won't see you till the spring. And until then.